Thank you for having me here today. Really, all I'm primarily doing when I come and meet the colleges at this time of year is to field your questions. I mean, we've had really some wonderful things going on within our system. Each of our colleges is a significant contributor to our system. We are doing things like increasing our degrees and certificates by a significant amount. We've conferred over 17,000 degrees and certificates last year alone. We have 28 separate statewide transfer agreements in place, as well as 28 degrees with designation, so that our students know when they go on to a four-year institution, they will have all of their courses transferred that are part of that agreement. And we also know that our 12,000 plus students who do transfer to a four-year institution perform as well, if not better, than their counterparts who started at that four-year institution. We've got a couple of really neat things going on, including our one of our alumni is going to be recognized at the annual American Association of Community College conference in April, and he is going to receive one of 6 national awards of outstanding alumni, and that's former Mayor Wellington Webb from Denver. He went to NJC and really credits NJC with the success in life. We also have one of our faculty members who's going to receive a national award at that same convention, wherein she's getting an Innovator of the Year award, and that goes to only 4 faculty throughout the entire United States out of all of the community colleges. So we've got a lot of wonderful things going on, and I just really want to open this up to your questions.
That's when everyone gets quiet.
I know, that's why they kept on going back.
Let's try again.
Okay. Come on, I know you all have questions. Yes.
I know the system office was pretty heavily involved when they developed the Colorado STEM roadmap, and Jennifer Giroux was in there. But since the roadmap now was launched, what are the plans for the system office in supporting STEM initiatives across community colleges?
Well, I don't have the specifics for you on that, but we will have, if we don't already have, a replacement for Jennifer. And I think we do, but I just don't have that individual. But STEM is clearly an important pathway, and I was really proud of the fact that we finally got our statewide articulation agreements and the sciences in place. Those have been really difficult to get the four-year institutions to put in place, and we now have them in place, which I think is a great pathway. But in terms of real specifics, I'm probably the wrong person to answer that. Our provost would be more appropriate to answer that specific question. Sure. Other questions? Yes.
Do you know what the timeline will be to replace the assistant provost and the CTE director?
It is my understanding they are doing interviews as we speak, and it's also my understanding that we had some great candidates. In fact, when I get back in the office, I know I'm having a meeting with our provost regarding that. So hopefully soon. Other questions? Jim?
I'll ask one, especially sitting next to you. The system's done a good job with matching funding for foundations. A lot of it has been in the healthcare area, but one thing we'd like to do, as you know, we're very involved in trying to bring international students to America, but is there a possibility of finding grants that we could match for international students?
Certainly there's a possibility. I don't know how many grants really are out there for that, but my suspicion is there's probably quite a few. So certainly, and we have a grant, it's probably more the grants person as opposed to in our foundation office, because I've charged our foundation director, who is now leaving us, unfortunately, but for a great new opportunity with Centura Healthcare System. So I've charged her and her successor as well with going out and raising money. And so we are going to be doing a lot of fundraising there, but with respect to grants, that's probably more the purview of our grants person, and we need to look at that. And Jim, if you want to follow up with me in an email, I can forward that to our grants person to make sure they're on the lookout for that as well, and see what other interest there is across the state for that type of thing. So scholarships, I do think that we may have another announcement pretty scholarship funding that's going to be coming in. And so I'm not 100% sure and don't want to say anything until we have things really buttoned down, but I think that we're going to have continual success and progress on the scholarship front. In terms of the budget, something I know that is near and dear to everybody's heart, but more to Jim's than anyone. The budget is looking good for next year. After an 11% increase in the current year in our statewide funding, next year we're expecting a continued increase in our state funding. I think next year, though, is probably likely to be the last year where we're seeing double-digit increases. When you have a situation of the year that begins 2017, 2018, where they're going to need over $500 million just to satisfy the K-12 needs in the state via the Constitution, as well as then the TABOR refunds coming back, we're going to be in a situation where things are going to be really tight in a year and a half or so. We are very, very pleased where we are in the budget now, and we expect finally to see our state funding exceed that level, which was the previous peak in 2008, 2009, but I'm not anticipating it will continue into the future. In the future, there's going to be so many needs and demands on the state budget from K-12, and yet, so to put it in perspective, K-12 is going to need about a $550 million boost in 2017-18, and overall revenues that we're allowed to keep will be only about $200 million. So there's going to be some tough times ahead. We're trying to maximize what we can while there's general fund available, and we're happy to see what the governor's put in his request, and it's working through the General Assembly accordingly, but longer term, I think that we need to continue to be watchful of what's happening with the budget. We're not going to enjoy these gains as we have previously. So, other questions? Yes?
What has been the success or interest in the Bachelor of Applied Science programs?
So, as you know, in order to implement a BAS, a Bachelor of Applied Science program, we need to do a lot of work. We need to do a feasibility study to find out what demand there is in the area where we intend to operate. We need to show that it's cost-effective for the institution as well as cost-effective for the student. In other words, what are our tuition rates going to be for the student? We need to make sure that we can get accreditation. We need to have a curriculum in place. And we need to assure that there's no four-year institution offering a similar offering within the service area. So it took a lot of planning to get the first couple of ones that we are going to bring through the pipeline up and going. The very first proposal we expect to bring to the board in the April board meeting is for water quality at Red Rocks Community College. The next ones I anticipate will be in dental hygiene. And my plan is I really want to move forward some that there will be no question on the part of the 4 years as to what we're doing and bring those through the forefront. And then we can bring up additional ones that may have more resistance in the 4-year sector. So, and then once it's approved by our board, it has to go to the Commission on Higher Education and then to the accrediting agencies. So my anticipation is for water quality, the first one. It's likely to be fall 2016 before that the first offerings are made, but that's a pretty good timeline given when the legislation passed and all the planning that needs to be done. So for your institution, I guess what I would say is bring forward to us ideas through our provost as to what type of Bachelor of Applied Science degrees you want to do, and understand that it's going to take a significant amount of work on your part to do all of the studies necessary to bring it forward. But at first, so the strategy has been, let's bring forward some specific BAS degrees where there's not going to be a whole lot of protest from the 4 years. Show them that we are really serious about it, and show them that these are needs that are out there, and then bring forward some of the others where there may be a little bit more protesting, but we want to try and work in good faith with the 4-year institutions to get them through the pipeline. I don't know, Jim, I think you all brought forward ag sciences, if I'm correctly remembering.
Right.
Go ahead.
That was one, and we've also talked about, we haven't moved it very far, but medical lab technician concepts or some allied health BAs?
I mean, if you are, depending on where you are in the process and how much resources you can commit to that, I'd start bringing those through very explicitly now, because it's going to take a while to get them in good enough shape to bring them forward. But in particular, for instance, I just came from Lamar, and I know that in Lamar, there's, as well as here, I'm assuming, in La Junta, there's demand for a lot of skills that, yes, CU Boulder will offer that degree, or UCD will offer it, but your students in your service area are not going to go to Denver or Boulder or Collins to get that degree. You need those skills here. And that is a little bit trickier in terms of convincing the Colorado Commission on that, but that's something that I want to move forward in the upcoming weeks. I want to make sure that we're meeting the local needs. I'm going to try and move away
What's
from
happening,
that.
Laura?
I think I'm too close to that.
Oh.
When all else fails, just run away from the mics, right? Or run away from the speakers. So I think that, you know, longer term, this is a really important service that we will provide to the local population. And I'd encourage you to start working quite a bit on getting those feasibility and demand studies done fairly soon. Because it takes a long time to get through the process. I mean, Red Rocks has been working on water quality, this legislation passed about a year ago. I guess it's not that long. But the legislation passed about a year ago, and they started working even before the legislation passed in anticipation of wanting to offer water quality, as did dental hygiene. It gets a little trickier when you're doing it across more than one college, because you have to have everybody come to the table and agree on the curriculum and the like, which is what we do as a system. But I get some of this moving, because the quicker we get it moving, the more we can have offerings out there. So, great question. Other questions? Yes?
It seems to be the trend across community colleges all over the country, the developmental ed classes. Can you speak to that? Do you see that increasing?
Actually, so developmental education, the trend is there's an increased need for developmental education. So yes and no in terms of what I see, which isn't a good answer for you. But let me talk a little bit about it. In terms of developmental education, for the first time in a long time, we have seen that the recent high school graduates needing developmental education went down as a proportion of those who graduated. Went from about 40% to 37%, which is a good thing, right? Because that means that the integration of what we do in concurrent enrollment and working with the high schools to say these are the competencies a student needs in order to be successful in college is working. So that's good. We also paid a lot of attention in our system to redoing and redesigning how we do developmental education, out of concern that a lot of students were not getting through the sequence as quickly as they should be getting through it. They get discouraged, they drop out, they go into debt, their financial aid is eaten up. And what really we want to do is get our students who need developmental education into college credit-bearing courses. So it stopped me if you all have heard all this already, because I feel like I'm sometimes a broken record on developmental education. But we totally have redesigned how we do developmental education. We reverse engineered the courses, if you will. In other words, we said, what are the competencies somebody needs to be successful in college algebra or in statistics? And design the developmental education courses to only meet those competencies instead of trying to put in all of the things we think they should know in those developmental education courses. So we redid those. In addition, we collapsed a lot of the courses together. In other words, we said, you know, we had 10 developmental education courses, so 10 separate exit points that a student can have if they just were not successful inside developmental education. It wasn't getting them to the college credit-bearing course as soon as we would have liked them to. So we have collapsed many of the courses, created, instead of having a separate reading and a separate writing course, we created But CCR, I do know is right, the college composition and reading. And then for math, we said, you need a different, not everybody needs algebra. You do need algebra if you're going into STEM. You may not need algebra if you're going into communications or a different avenues. So we decided to have two different pathways for students so that if they're going into one field, they don't get hung up, quite frankly, on the algebra. So our goal in all this was to accelerate students through developmental education. And so what we're seeing in very, very, very new data. So it's preliminary, and I don't want to suggest that it's there yet. But the preliminary data is showing that within one semester, we are seeing students succeed in their college credit bearing course at a higher rate or the same rate as it took them 3 years to complete in the old original sequence. So and that's 3 years after their completion of the top developmental education course they needed to have. So it could have taken them another 2 years on top of that to get through their dev ed courses. So we're seeing some good success, but I want to stress that it's really preliminary data. And what we're also seeing is the trend of putting a student who is testing at a certain level directly into college credit course, along with supplemental academic instruction, is really showing very, very strong results. So, while the need at the high school level may be going down, it's not necessarily the case of returning adults, right? And we have about 1 million adults in Colorado who have no post-secondary training. And we all know that when you're further away from math, you lose it. Or it becomes much more hard to catch up the further away you are from having that high school math course. So the adults coming into the system, more likely than not, are still going to need some sort of developmental education depending upon their background. And in addition, we purposely, we went from 10 courses down to trying to get people through these developmental education sequence in one semester. So intentionally, we lowered the number of courses that were out there and lowered our full-time equivalent enrollment in those courses. That has had clearly a financial implication on many of the colleges, particularly those who were very, very heavy into the developmental education courses. So if you just look at the raw numbers, you'd say, oh, well, the need's going down because there's less students or less credit hours in the courses. But that's really kind of masking what's truly going on, which is us attempting to get the students through the developmental sequence much more quickly.
I think it's from what I've seen here, just number of days, it's working much better now. Like us, writing and bringing together, I think that's great. We keep getting it a lot better.
Good.
But the other thing, we're seeing students come in, especially from high schools, that don't have keyboarding, so they're typing like this. And then we have the information literacy. They come in with no library skills, and I don't know if that's results of they're doing so much testing that they don't have time to do that kind of stuff.
Maybe it's the internet and learning that people.
Well, it is, but they still can't type the kids.
Well, I will tell you, I never had a typing course in my life.
Really?
Ever. And I was in that era where it was sort of required, and I never took a typing course. I can't say I'm good. I would not have any idea how quickly I type, but I do get it done. Other questions? Yes.
Can you talk a little about the Manslow labs? I haven't heard much about them lately. Are they still something that's potentially going to happen more in a comprehensive sort of setting, I guess?
Well, so the Nanslow labs are alive and well, and are accessible to our students who want to use them. And I don't know if you've ever visited them here, biology. Have you visited the lab at the Red
I
Rocks?
have not been able to do that. I'm kind of a naysayer about any sort of virtual lab, and I want to. And I know it's not a traditional virtual lab.
You should go see them.
I want to know if you have the data yet on that, because last time you said the data was kind of being put together and you didn't have it. So I just kind of want to know the comparison of people taking a more traditional lab compared to the Mansell lab. self-selecting and the type of student that's going to do well in that sort of lab setting? Are they the only ones taking it, or they are successful? That's the sort of data I'm looking to see.
Well, I would suggest you go take a visit because they are very, very impressive. In fact, our former board chair, John Trefny, was president of the Colorado School of Mines and had been a physicist for over 40 years. And he went on a tour with us about a year ago, I want to say, and he was blown away by the equipment that is there and the use of the technology. And he indicated that many commercial labs don't have access to the equipment that was in that room. Now, at the time, it's just, I wouldn't even be doing it a service to tell you what the exact equipment was. I know what it is when I look at it, but I can't tell you the names of them. And he was very impressed. Now, in terms of the data on that, I have not asked recently, probably since last time I was here, as to what the success rates are, but I do know nationally that there's been a lot of data out recently that says online students, specifically in science online, were performing as well as students in the lab online. But I really would suggest you, when you have a chance, and I know it's far away, it's up at Red Rocks in their Arvada campus, but when you have a chance, go take a look at it and watch how it is working at any given time.
Do you notice that data get parsed out from physical sciences, biological? I mean,
They did have it.
I wonder if there's
They did
different
have it.
success rates.
No, they did have it parsed out. And in fact, there is an article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed that I haven't had a chance yet to read, but I think it was in the last month on that. But they did have it parsed out, yeah. Other questions? Oh, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask how an update on that quarterly evaluation.
I'm the wrong person to do that. Trust me, I'm the wrong person to do that. Julie's probably far better on that. And Jim, I don't remember, because Jim also serves on the ERP, the Enterprise Resource Planning Subcommittee we have, and presidents and exec staff. I can't remember what the update is on that. Julie's probably the best person. So I get a little dangerous when I'm out there, and I try to pretend I know something I don't, because I don't. Yes?
Reading the new strategic plan, one of the things that kind of jumped out at me was the de-aggregating the diversity data in all the colleges and trying to get our core staff and faculty with more diverse student populations. Can you speak a little bit to sort of what the impetus behind that was and what the plan is to do that?
So, many strategic plans, that's part of Transformer Workforce. So many strategic plans that are out there will have a workforce component. And it's not been something that our plans had since I've been around. And I don't believe there was a strategic plan prior to me coming. So in other words, this is new for all of us, but I know the individual colleges typically will have that type of a component. And it's not just in terms of transforming our workforce in terms of diversity. It has to do with professional development. It has to do with a lot of different things in terms of assuring that we have up-to-date skills to work with our workforce. And not just ethnic diversity, but age diversity and that type of thing. And part of the impetus to this is when we have over half of the students when over half of the students of color in higher education are within our walls, within our colleges, and oftentimes a student comes from a various background, there are different cultural biases that will impact their ability to be successful that has nothing to do with things that you and I might imagine. I mean, as opposed to as a student sitting in a classroom with a teacher up front, there are some things that, from a cultural standpoint, can be roadblocks for their success. And it's important to have good role models for our students coming through the classroom so that they can be successful and graduate and understand that there's a good path for them to move forward. So that's part of the impetus with respect to that, but also there's a standard personnel rule, if you will, that says you have a lack of diversity problem and you're up plus or minus 20%, and I believe it's 20 percentage points, but one way or the other, if you're outside of that range relative to the overall population. And there could be a need, there is a need for a diversity plan at the federal level. So it's something we haven't given our resources. When I say given our resources, with money for professional development and the like, it's something we haven't concentrated that much on, but it does have an important impact on the success of students. And so looking at our student population, I wanted to make sure we were able to address those issues within our workforce as well. Yeah, so, and our board, it's a really big interest for our board as well. Just knowing that students will succeed better if they can relate to someone who tends to be more like them as well. Other questions?
About students?
Yes.
Tuition, anything?
I don't have any.
You don't have any tuition, or you don't have questions?
I don't have
regarding
any
tuition?
questions.
So we do try to, so along those lines, we do try to keep our tuition rates lower, certainly lower than our four-year institutions in the state. And we'd like not to increase tuition much at all, but unfortunately, state funding until recently has been going down, and now we rely on for 2/3 of our budget tuition, whereas 10 years ago, it was only 1/3 of our budget. So when the state is cutting as dramatically as it has, we had to increase tuition higher than we would have liked. Having said that, now that the state has brought money back to the table, we are trying to keep our tuition increases much lower than otherwise would be the case. And this year we did a 4.5% tuition increase, which brought our tuition rates up over a little bit over $3,700 for a full-time student for the entire year. We are similarly going to try and keep our tuition increase in check for next year, but that action takes place at the April board meeting, and we also have to balance what happens in 2017-18 when we know state funding is. I would bet in a lot of things that in 2017-18 we're going to see a decrease in our funding in community colleges once again. And in order to maintain quality education for everyone, for our students, we do need to have some tuition increases higher than we would like. We're trying to keep our tuition increases in check. But you sitting there having to pay tuition probably don't think it's all that much in check anymore.
And the one good thing, for those of you who don't remember, the students might not, we have the pilot rate for out-of-state students compared to our counterparts in the urban areas, and that affects someone like Elam, who can come here at about, is it about half the cost of what it would be if she went to an urban school? And the board's been good about granting the rural schools that pilot rate. So we're glad we're able to do it. We're glad that you're able to come.
Well, and it is at its lowest rate it can be according to state law right now. So it may not seem all that great in terms of cost, but it's still much, much lower than, well, it's at the lowest level we possibly can have at. Other questions?
I'll ask you.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Albert.
What would happen if President Obama's plan to make college free for everybody? What would happen to the value of the degree?
I would expect that I don't think there would be a negative on the value of the degree as long as we maintain our quality, which we will pledge to do under all circumstances. So President Obama's plan to have free community college tuition for the first 2 years, as long as you have a 2.5 GPA, and as long as you're progressing appropriately, which I think the question still remains, what does that mean? And it also is only for students who are going to transfer, and then other students or other programs yet to be defined in gainful employment. And we really don't know what that means right now in terms terms of gainful employment. So I think that it would be incumbent upon us at the system level, at your college level, to ensure that quality does not go down and there's still positive return on value, return on investment. I don't see us changing that. In fact, Tennessee has a similar plan in place, although Tennessee is only doing it for recent high school graduates, so it's not for adults and for recent high school graduates. It's a subset of the population. The first year it will be in effect will be next fall, but this is the application year, and everybody's required to fill out a FAFSA form, which is a form of federal financial aid. They're seeing a huge increase in interest. Now, whether or not that translates into students is a different question. I do think, in fact, it will translate into students, but not by the 50+ thousand that currently they have seen in terms of applications. So normally, they get about 8,000 new high school students in any given year coming directly to community college. Right now, they have applications filled out for over 50,000. So that really is pretty tremendous in terms of the demand that's out there. A lot of those students, however, will likely go to a four-year institution or may trip for some other reason. Right now, Tennessee's expecting about 20,000 net new students as a result of the plan. And so the vision President Obama has behind this is when K-12 education was made free and universal and required for all public K-12 was put in place, you saw a significant increase in the education level of the United States and prosperity that echoed in times and periods for which we have not seen again in a long time. We used to be in the United States first in the world in our educational levels. Right now we are fifth in the world. We've slipped because a lot of the other countries have been increasing their educational investment and their educational commitment to both post-secondary and secondary education. But what's most concerning to me is the fact that we will have a generation of students who will be less educated than their parents were. And we rank 12th in terms of young students, the younger generation going on to post-secondary degrees. So I think that this is an effort to restore our position once again, to be first in the world in our educational attainment as far as post-secondary education goes. And I think that the president's goal here is to set us off on a path once again of prosperity because of the increased education level. So I think the intentions are very positive. Realistically, it's not going to pass at the federal level. It's too expensive. And even if it were to pass at the federal level, the 25% match here may make it very difficult for the state to fund it, even though it's only $30 million. $30 million could be hard to come by in the state general fund. So I think really President Obama's plan is more impetus to show how important community colleges are, the value they bring to the table, and has brought a lot of attention to needing to increase our post-secondary degree completion in the nation. I really think it's planting seeds, and I don't anticipate, unless the president puts a ton of pressure on Congress to get this through, I don't anticipate it really passing. But it is really, I think, a good validation of the work that you all are doing and you're doing in the Colorado National Community Colleges. But I really think it's going to have a hard time getting through Congress unless the president chooses to hold up other pieces of legislation to make it happen. And I hope if he's willing to do that. The flip side to that, what I worry more about rather than quality, the flip side to that is I think the federal government has never really recently, in this administration, has not seen recognition they don't like. And certainly with the federal money, there will be a lot of strings attached. And they will find, we thought we were regulated now, which we are really highly regulated and become far, far worse. Worse, not that I don't feel that we need to justify ourselves and be accountable, but the way they're having us justify ourselves and be accountable through gainful employment and state authorization and the like is really, really alarming. And I think they will find all kinds of other ways to increase the red tape and the strings that come along with the increased investment, which they feel they need to have outcomes for. Any questions on President Obama's plan? Any more questions on that?
Not my big, the cost, but the value, I still feel, yes, I'm old-fashioned, you need some skin in the game in order to appreciate an education rather than it just being free. But the regulations, is it going to be, who determines the tuition rates? Who determines the costs in every other state? Does it become like Medicaid where you do high costs so you get more federal money?
That's the risk.
It's-
That is the huge risk. That's the risk. I just think they will start, the feds as well as the state, will start being much more onerous in terms of their regulations on this. And in particular, they're going to feel as if a huge investment is made and therefore tuition needs to be held low or not at all. That's a big risk. Jim, you had another question, or was that the question?
Oh, maybe kind of, at our individual campuses, we try to figure where we're heading and all of that, trying to look into the crystal ball. From your standpoint, philosophically, where do you think higher ed and especially community colleges are going in the next 10 to 15 years?
I think we're in a huge period of uncertainty in higher education. I think that there's a lot of question as to the value of a degree, not our degree per se, but any college degree, and in particular a four-year degree, as many students are graduating with high debt levels, and many students are having difficulty even given an improving national economy finding jobs. So I truly think it's going to be a period where there's going to be a lot of soul searching, questioning as to what is best for students and are they going to be able with their degree to get a higher standard of living than without their degree. Layer on to that the fact that nationally the high school graduating population has been decreasing since 2010. There are only 10 states in the nation that have seen the number of graduates expand since 2010. Colorado is one of them. But even given that, in Colorado, we're seeing far fewer students graduate on a percent increase basis. Well, someone would just back up. We're seeing growth in the number of students graduating from high school, which is the traditional age that many colleges utilize or cater to try and get students into their college doors. Nationally, that population is decreasing. In Colorado, it's growing and is anticipated to continue to grow, but at a slower pace than it had been prior to 2010 as the baby bust generation comes through. So the demand for higher education, I think, is going to be tapering off or decreasing. And in fact, you've seen that nationally where I think in the last year, half of all colleges in the nation, 4-year, 2-year alike, saw a decrease in their overall enrollment. I think you're going to continue to see that. So we are in an age where there's going to be pressure to keep tuition down, as well it should be, where there's going to be a lot of competition for students and a lot of alternatives to traditional higher education. You know, the MOOCs came out with all this splash of massive online open courseware. 100,000 students signed up for a class. Well, that's not going to be successful in and of itself. But what it did show you was there are alternative ways to getting a college degree where students are going to be going to multiple colleges typically before they get their degree and start trying to find the most affordable pathway to a degree. I think that is good for community colleges when you couple it with the fact that we have the statewide transfer agreements in place. Our tuition level at a far lower rate than the four-year counterparts in the state with the statewide transfer agreements should create demand as long as we maintain quality, which is my understanding we are based upon the information I get, should boost enrollment in community colleges as well as the national potential. But it also means there's going to be a lot of competition for students, even though we're growing here in Colorado, the number of high school students that are graduating. The traditional way our four-year institutions have patched up the fiscal network is to cater to out-of-state students. Well, with that market drying up, they're going to start going after students in state. And I think it's going to create some competition for us. And we need to very much be open to different ways of doing business, more creative ways of teaching. And I don't mean creative to take shortcuts. I mean things like the immersion grants that we let out as a system a couple of years ago. I expect that we're going to do some innovation grants as a result of our strategic plan. It's going to encourage faculty and staff to come up with new and great ideas as to how we can help our students be successful. And I think that JC had some of those grants, did they not, Jim? And we're very successful in those. So I think that's good. But I think that we need to be continually bearing in mind how our students are learning, how our students are changing, and the fact is there's going to be a lot of competition out there, in my opinion, for students. You just saw, well, maybe, I don't know how many of you are aware of Sweetbriar. They closed in the last, I want to say, month. It was a small liberal arts women's college, had a $94 million endowment, and they decided just to shut it down because they didn't see any growth happening in terms of their enrollment. I think it's a shame when you have a $94 million endowment that you cannot make an institution run, because I think they could have made it run. Or they could have merged it with some other institutions nearby. I know they have proposals to do that. Or they could have gone co-ed. I mean, there were a number of different strategies they could have adopted and didn't. I do think you're going to see more and more smaller colleges starting to shutter their doors or look at mergers or look at more partnerships to move forward. And I do think partnerships are going to be key in the future as to how we continue to be effective for our students and efficient for our students. These are just a couple of thoughts. Do you have some more to add, Jim? Because I know you've looked at this a lot.
You've hit on the key points. I was going to ask you, are they looking for a place to put that $94 million?
Believe you me, I've asked. You know, so Sweetbriar, the real unfortunate thing is, and this is something we don't do as a system, and I guard against it for many different costs, is they took out a huge amount of debt. And they had a balloon payment coming due. And they had sufficient funds in their endowment to make that balloon payment. It was a $30 million payment. And rather than teach out the existing freshman class and get them to move through, they just shut it down and asked their counterparts, like Mary Baldwin College in Collinsville, to teach out these students. It remains to be seen what they're doing with the endowment. I'm sure there are all kinds of federal, I say this with great certainty, yet I haven't. I'm sure there are all kinds of federal red tape that they have to go through or commitments to donors as to what they do with that endowment. But it's, you know, some people were characterizing their closure as brave. I look at it and I said, with that kind of money, what you could do here at OJC, what Lamar could do with that kind of money, it was similar. Well, their enrollment was less than both of those colleges, and still, you should find a way to make that work, at least to teach out those remaining classes. You could stay in business for 3 more years. But I just think, you know, and I don't want to go into the why, I wasn't sitting in the boardroom. I have no idea all the different other things going on with it. But I do think that it's symptomatic of some shakeout that's likely to come in the future. I don't know when the last time was that I heard of a college closing that was a not-for-profit. Corinthian, there were issues there. That's a for-profit, but not-for-profit, I haven't heard that. And I think there's a lot of soul-searching going on in a lot of smaller colleges throughout the nation. And one of the things about is we are on very solid financial footing. OJC is, the system as a whole is, and colleges are. And one of the reasons we are is we made a big commitment to increasing our reserves when I started about 10 years ago. And I don't think there was any convincing that was needed here, but there was throughout the system. And we don't go into a lot of debt. In fact, our debt capacity and our debt ratios are very, the debt capacity is high, our ratios are low. I'm not somebody who necessarily likes debt because you have to pass it on to the students, and you could be in a situation like Sweetbriar found themselves into. So other questions? Is there anything you want me to know? I mean, I get out here, I guess it's been twice this year, right? Or twice in the academic year. Actually, 3 times. No, twice. I did my Q&A at the same time we did the visit. So what kind of new things are going on here? What kind of things do you see that you want me to be aware of? This isn't a shy. This is it last time. Yes.
Well, as you alluded to, that we received 2 large STEM grants here at OJC. And I think there's a lot of different programming that's been taken effect in the last 3 years since the grant began. Now we're in our 5th year. That I think is unique for this area. So last summer we piloted a undergraduate research experience, CCD one as well, I believe, for Metro. But we're not close to a 4-year school except for Pueblo. So it's kind of unique that we have faculty here on board that has a research background in university. So
It's amazing.
they should be sure proud of that, and we will continue that again this summer as well.
So can you give me an example then of what a student should expect if they're going through that?
Yeah, so the pilot program for the STEM research experience was an introduction to field research and what it means to conduct field studies, collect the data, look at that data, discuss it, analyze it. This year they're going to take it a step further and actually do some more thorough analytics to the data and then do a presentation at the end of the course
That's
program.
wonderful.
So they did a variety of different STEM topics, from collecting albedo readings. They went out and did some biological observations. They did some geological field studies, astronomy. As you know, we have a
Yes.
telescope here.
Yes.
So we have very large astronomy classes. And so it was a good introduction to pilot it, see what the interests were. So
What was the interest?
well, we kept it small, so we only had,
So restricted it.
yeah, to just 4 students, because it was a week long. This time we're extending it to a 2-credit-hour course, because that's really kind of what the work they did. They spent 10, 12 hours in the field each day, and it was only a 1-credit-hour course, but they were excited to do it. So it was only
That
4
would be
students.
wonderful, yeah.
4 students last summer, and then we're extending it to 10 students this summer.
Well, congratulations, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, don't you partner Air Force Academy on your astronomy? Yeah. And astronomy is not easy.
No. We also just received 3 dishes from Comcast cable,
Yeah.
cable around the board. So we're starting now a radio astronomy program. So we have optical and radio.
Wow.
And we're also doing some K-12 outreach with 2 small towns, Campo and the other one I get Plainville.
Plainview.
Plainview. I always get the names of those towns wrong. 2 small towns out in far eastern Colorado, so that they can have small regular astronomy units that we purchase for them, so that they can get involved and then also communicate with community college here on what we're doing at a larger scale. So that's coming down the pipeline.
Now, is that your area too? Because I know you just got the Faculty of the Year, the Jerry Warco Award. Is this similar to it?
No, it's not exactly.
Shows you what I. To me, offering remote is really, I mean, it's a wonderful service that you provide to Southeastern Colorado. Because these students would be able to get that anywhere else.
That ties in, and STEM was a funder of it, and Wayne was involved as well as a lot of people in instruction. The whole telepresence where
Yep.
all of our schools, all of them now, have telepresence units, and eventually Fort Lyon may have a telepresence unit where we can offer courses, and that's what Wayne did. And Ryan back there set up.
It's pretty amazing.
And for rural areas, I think what we're seeing is it's more and more difficult, especially for K-12, to attract qualified instructors based on their guidelines. So the telepresence affords us the opportunity to help them.
It's a great, great program. What else would you like me to know?
We have the best president.
Yeah.
I agree. I would say that every, I won't say, I
Yeah,
get
at
in
every
trouble
school.
I get in trouble if I, but Jim is wonderful. And what we're fortunate about Jim as well is, A, he's had the experience in state government, he knows how to run budgets, and he's been stable, he's been here for a long time. We know, and I mean that very positively, because we know that when you have stability in the presidency, and when you have continuity, that you can just make a lot of great things happen. So we are very fortunate that you came back to La Junta and chose to make your commitment to OJC. So thank you, Jim.
Well, this is where I started. This was my AA degrees from OJC.
I know. We're just very fortunate to have you here. OJC's been fortunate to have two long-standing, you're only the second president.
No, four, but
But
two.
McDivitt was here for,
Dr. McDivitt was here 41 years,
Yeah.
and I will not be here.
duly noted, Jim. I can tell you, I will not either. I can't expect somebody to do that who I'm not going to do it myself. I wouldn't live that long. Yes.
I kind of going back to the questions and answer. How is the accreditation with HLC coming along with community colleges as we'll be up for accreditation?
It's been good. I have not had any issues. I visit with every accreditation team, usually by phone. And gosh, how long ago was your accreditation? It seems like it was just
8
yesterday.
years ago,
That long ago?
8
Yeah,
or 9.
we'll be pushing the button in 2016.
Oh my goodness. Well, the accreditation's gone well. They always will have a question about financial stability and how fiscally stable is the system, how fiscally stable is the college. And they've come, there was a time when I first started, almost 11 years ago now, there was a time where the accrediting agencies were very concerned about our fiscal stability in Colorado. But I think that they have become convinced that we are now very, very stable. Our consolidated financial index that the Joint Budget Committee staff puts together shows us as being close to the top. Actually, we're at the top, mainly because we don't take on debt and because we've consistently built our reserves. And so with that index and with our financial stability being as high as it is, that has really sort of erased one of the big red flag concerns they had. What I have seen in accreditation is they still don't know what they want with assessment. And I would say in almost every accreditation that comes through, there's a whole, they like to try and find something on assessment even though they don't know quite frankly what they're talking about assessment. And we've had some really interesting types of professional development and assessment that has gone on throughout the system. I know Front Range has put in a lot of different assessment tools of faculty and of students. So I think that they're becoming much more comfortable. It's not kind of the big red flag that it was, say, 4 years ago, but usually assessment comes to the top in accreditations, as well as if you didn't pay attention to something I told you last time, you and I both know what's going to happen then. And I can't remember, because I've taken part in so many of these, if you had any focus issues. Assessment. It's hard to avoid assessment. So I would expect them to come back on that.
What about the faculty qualifications? The
Faculty qualifications are huge, and we need to make sure, it's my understanding, everybody have the appropriate faculty qualifications, but they also have the documentation on hand when they're there.
and that's for adjuncts and concurrent instructors as well.
Yep. Yeah, you really need to make sure that you have all your adjunct instructors as well as your full-time faculty members files current, because they will ask for that. And we also know in nursing accreditation, boy, that is a big red flag if you don't have, I forget the exact data, but it's what, 50% for master's nurses. And that's both adjunct as well as full-time, so they are real sticklers on that. I haven't had an issue come up at any college, but part of it would be preparation. At one point too, we had done mock accreditation visits for the system bodies. We would hire someone out to go out there and do that, and it may be helpful. When are they coming for you?
February 2017.
Probably wouldn't hurt to go through some of the accreditation.
Who would I contact?
I contact Jerry Migler. It's
Okay.
not like we have a program
Right.
that we do, but we can get you in touch with some resources that would do that for you. I just think it's a good thing to go through that and get maybe one of the other colleges to come help and do an accreditation visit. Jerry actually has been on assessment teams for NCA, and so he can put you in touch with resources that help identify folks who can do a mock visit. And it would be good for you to call Jerry, because he does, and just ask him what are accreditation visits coming up with, because he still is very active in doing accreditation visits at other colleges.
Oh, okay. Very good. Thank you.
Sure. Any other things you want to tell me or is on your mind? Well, thank you very, very much for having me here. Thank you for coming on this beautiful afternoon. We could have been out maybe doing something else, but thank you. Pardon me?